So welcome everyone. A man said to me recently, why don't you do PowerPoint? And I said to my husband, I think I need to polish up my act. I think I need to do PowerPoint. He said, you don't need to do PowerPoint. Everyone does PowerPoint. And then I'm at a presentation and the presentator still hasn't begun and we've been there 15 minutes and the PowerPoint is not working. Well, my whiteboard never fails me. And my whiteboard also allows me to go wherever I want. And there is certainly a lot of confusion about today about what is truth. And if you want to be assured what is truth, whatever they take down on YouTube, you can just about be assured that must be the truth. Yep. Because there's a huge company out there, it's taken over the world just about, it's called the pharmaceutical company. Yep. And it's a company that is not based on truth. And I do recognise that in a crisis a drug can save a life, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about disease. We're talking about the body when it is not functioning properly. And the whole world over the last few years was taken down by this, wasn't it? I know our retreat was shut for 11 months in 2020. I don't know what they think small business are going to do when you have to shut down for 11 months. Now, we are fortunate, we are blessed in that we are not in debt, but can you imagine if someone is in debt? It was a devastating time, and the economy still has not recovered for what happened. So there is one thing that everybody agrees on, no matter what your theory is, what your belief in how the body heals, whether it can heal itself or whether it needs a drug to help it heal. And by the way, drugs never cure disease. Can you ever say never? Yes, you can say with this. Drugs never cure disease. They just change the form and location of. And so whatever a person's view, there is something that everyone agreed on over the last few years, and that is that the best thing to resist disease is a strong immune system. You can't deny that a strong immune system is the very best basis to resist disease. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. How can you boost this immune system? And also it's important to know what takes it down. So we're going to do as our basis the basic laws that govern the functioning of the human body and having a look at how they boost the immune system. We're hoping in the next couple of months my new book will be released, and it's called Sustain Me, and it's a book on natural remedies. My first book, Self-Heal by Design, unfortunately it's been sold out, but my husband told me this afternoon that it's left the printers and it's being delivered to my daughter's house, and this is her website. It's Misty Mountain USA. That's easy to remember, but the mountain is the full word, Misty Mountain USA. So you can contact via that website and order the book Self-Heal by Design. Self-Heal by Design is a book that explores in detail the role of, or the true role of microorganisms in disease. And that should be available in the next week through that website. So let's have a look at how we can boost the immune system and what takes the immune system down. And the first letter S is sunshine. Now what sunshine does, whenever it touches the skin, it stimulates blood flow. And Leviticus 17:11 states that the life of the flesh is in the blood. So anything that stimulates blood movement stimulates life. So why is the life of the flesh in the blood? The blood contains red blood cells, and the red blood cells carry oxygen. And after the break, we're going to have a look at the respiratory system in detail. I'm very sorry, this morning I said that our last lecture today was on sleep. It's actually tomorrow night. Tonight is respiratory. The blood also carries nutrients, and these nutrients are break down from the food that we eat. The blood carries water. Now at this point I want to have a look at the 4 vital elements needed for life, the 4 vitals. Number 1 vital element needed for life is oxygen. Number 2 vital element needed for life is water. Number 3 is sodium. And number 4 is potassium. So potassium and sodium are definitely supplied in the food we eat and the nutrients. But sodium particularly, we take into our body, yes, in food, but also in added salt. And I think you'll agree with me, lentils and potatoes are inedible without salt, is that right? Our palate tells us that we need salt. We're going to be looking at heart health tomorrow, and when we look at heart health, I'm going to explore the salt issue in detail and show you that salt is not the enemy. And potassium is really found in all your fresh fruits and vegetables. So you can see here the blood is the carrier of the vital elements needed for life. The blood does something else, and the blood carries away waste. And any machinery always has something to fuel it and also has a waste. And this living machinery is no different. So no wonder the blood is called the life of the flesh. But the blood carries something else, and that is white blood cells. And the white blood cells are often seen as our immune system, is that right? Yeah. And we have 5 different types of white blood cells. We have neutrophils. And neutrophils, they make up approximately 60% of our white blood cells. So it's the neutrophils that are ones that are probably the most well known as white blood cells. Neutrophils, when they're given the message that there's an enemy, maybe there's a pathogen bacteria, they can actually merge out of the blood and go into the tissues, and they envelope, they surround the pathogen or the bacteria, and would you believe it, they release hydrogen peroxide to kill that pathogen. And that's actually what pus is. It's dead white blood cells. They basically give their life in killing off the enemy. Lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are another white blood cell. And lymphocytes make up about 25% of the white blood cells. And as the name implies, these lymphocytes are found in your lymph nodes. So this morning we looked at the lymphatic system, which sweeps away waste from the tissues. It takes the waste into the lymph nodes. Nodes are in your neck, armpits, groin predominantly. And there's lymphocytes in there that can also deal with any enemy that's been swept into there. Lymphocytes are also like the scouts. So they're roaming around and they have sensors on them. These sensors pick up harmful pathogens, and then they communicate with the neutrophils, which basically go to that area to clean it up. Then there's monocytes, and monocytes make up approximately 10% of our white blood cells. And one of monocytes' roles is to clean up, basically clean up after the neutrophils and some of the lymphocytes have done their job. And the next is eosinophils. And eosinophils make up approximately 3% of the white blood cell, and basophils. And basophils, they make up the last 2% of the white blood cells. At Misty Mountain, when I was still working there, I used to do live blood analysis where we'd take a drop of blood, put it on a slide and put that under the microscope, and it would come up on the television. And a person could look at their blood. And they'd see the red blood cells moving around, and here and there you see the white blood cells. And if someone has got an infection, maybe they got a bad cold, maybe they got diarrhea, then there will be a lot more white blood cells. And that's quite normal, because when someone has an issue in their body, more white blood cells come along to fix the problem up. And if someone has an allergy, and the most common allergens are to two main foods, which is dairy and the hybridised wheat of today. The wheat was hybridised in the 1950s. And if someone has an allergy to these foods, you will see a lot more eosinophils. Eosinophils, in their structure, have all these little dancing bright dots in the nucleus, and they're histamine granules. So if someone has an allergy and has more eosinophil, their histamine levels rise. And if someone has an allergy and they go to the doctor, what does the doctor give them? Antihistamines, because they are basically inflammatory. But the million-dollar question, which is not often asked and should always be asked, is why are the eosinophils so high? And once a person stops the dairy and the wheat, it can take 2 months to see a difference in the blood. And that's why I say to people, if you do have allergy, one of the most common allergy symptoms would be hay fever, asthma, psoriasis, eczema on the skin, hives. These are some of the allergy symptoms. Yeah, weeping eyes. And some people say, I've got an allergy to pollen. But I have found that when these foods are stopped, after a couple of months, there's no allergy to pollen. And I've seen people stop these foods, and I think you'll agree with me, wheat is everywhere. It's everywhere, it's everywhere. It's in just about everything. Can you get a wheat that hasn't been hybridised? Yes, it's called spelt. Spelt is from the original wheat. Very similar to the original wheat. And so a lot of people, when I say, try stopping these foods, they'll say, well, I did try and it didn't make any difference. And I say, how long did you stop for? 2 weeks. That takes about 8 weeks. Now, you can eat a slice of bread and it'll be out of your body in 24 hours, we hope. But the effect can remain for up to 2 months. So you've got to give it that little bit of time. And I did a live blood analysis on a couple one day, and they were in their mid-30s. And the lady said, I know I've got an allergy to wheat and dairy. She said, I get rashes. She said, I get diarrhea. And she'd recently eaten the food, and yes, we saw a whole lot of eosinophils. See, in one slide, coming from one dot of the blood, you will often see 1 or 2 eosinophils, and they light up really bright. Now, if someone has an allergy, you'll see 4 or 5. And if someone has a severe allergy like celiac, you'll see about 21. So it is an indicator. But you know what I find? The blood just confirms what I already see in the symptoms. So I don't necessarily need to have a live blood cell analysis to know this. The symptoms tell you. And she told me before I even looked at the blood. And then I looked at her husband's blood, and he also had a big rise in eosinophils. And I said, well, look at that. He said, oh, what a load of rubbish. He said, I don't get eczema. He said, I don't have diarrhea. And she looked at him and she said, but you fall asleep in the restaurant. And the most common symptom of really a wheat intolerance is brain fog, sleepiness. How many people have a sandwich for lunch and they're falling asleep all afternoon? And also bloating. And I meet so many people that live with these things and think that's just, what do they blame poor old age? Poor old age gets blamed for many things, doesn't it? But it's not necessary. And I've had people say to me, since I stopped the wheat and the dairy, I don't fall asleep in the afternoon anymore. My brain is clearer, and I don't get the bloating anymore. And there's a website, I'll give you the website here. And this guy he's a friend of mine, and he makes beautiful bread. It's totally gluten-free. It's called Simple Needs. And I don't know about you, but I've tasted some pretty bad gluten-free breads. Yeah. Oh yes, not very nice. This is magnificent. And he has about 4 different types, but they're all gluten-free. He has a quinoa, he has a pumpernickel. And he told me, I talked to him recently because he did an interview of me, about a month ago, and he said he's in dialogue with Whole Foods, with Trader Joe's and with Sprouts to get his bread in all of their stores. So it will be available much more very soon. But it's a delicious bread, and it will keep in the fridge for weeks. And it might seem a bit hard. You toast it and it comes up very soft. Yeah?
Is einkorn wheat a good wheat?
Yes, it is. Einkorn is probably the original wheat, whereas spelt is a wild or a field hybrid of the Enkenhorn or the Enkhorn wheat. So they're often called ancient grains. Yes?
I'm just wondering, Barbara, did that man supply bread at Seth's wedding?
He did.
Okay.
He was at Seth's wedding. Seth is my grandson. Edna and I are old friends. He brought 25 loaves. It is more expensive than the bread you may usually buy, but one slice of his bread has probably got enough. It's got the nutritive value of many whole loaves of bread. So it's an excellent bread, because the next question is, well, what are we going to eat? Because wheat is so predominant in so many things. One lady said to me, my baby's covered in eczema. So I said to her, are you eating wheat and dairy? She said, I am. I said, well, my suggestion is to stop. A month later, she said, I've stopped and my baby's still got eczema. And I said, be patient. 1 more month. She emailed me exactly a month later, so that's 2 months after she stopped. Eczema was gone. She sent me a photo of her baby. No eczema on the skin. A lady said to me recently, my grandson, he's got really bad eczema, so my daughter took him to a paediatrician. And the paediatrician said, you got to stop the wheat and the dairy. Oh, how nice to hear that a paediatrician is acknowledging that. Because many advise the cortisone drugs. Cortisone is a very nasty drug. And if it's used extensively over many years, it can actually start to cause the very thing that it's trying to eliminate. A person can put cortisone on a bad eczema and it'll seem like a miracle drug because it'll go. But guess what happens a week later? It comes back, and it comes back even worse. And also the cortisone eventually starts to interfere with your adrenal glands, which is where your own natural cortisone is made. See, we live in an amazing body that's got an inbuilt ability to heal itself when you give it the right conditions. And one of the problems is when people are eating allergy foods, we get an overload of the immune system. And when you get an overload of the immune system, then you get inflammation in the body. The first part of our immune system, when you look at the human body is the skin. The skin is a covering, and the skin covers and protects the body from outside pathogens. So the skin is part of the immune system. But let's go to the head where we see 7 holes. You've got 2 ears and 2 eyes and 2 nostrils and a mouth. Now let's look at the ears first. There's an eardrum there. A man emailed me recently and said, you know, I've got a lot of pain. I've got this hole in the eardrum. And I said, well, if you have an ear infection and the eardrum bursts to let the pus out, that usually heals very quickly. But if the eardrum has had physical damage, it can be very difficult to heal. And the eardrum is a protection that's part of your immune system. And then I got the email back. He was cleaning his ear with those buds, those earbuds, and punctured a hole in his eardrum. So I said, no more. What do you call them? Q-tips? Is that another way? I'll tell you a scary story. A guest told me this. He used to see his mother and father cleaning their ears with it, so he put them in his ears, and he's walking along, little 5-year-old, with them out of his ears. His brother came along and went. When he came to us, he was in his 40s and he was almost deaf. So when you get physical damage to those eardrums, it's very difficult to heal. Can you put anything in the ear? Not if there's a broken eardrum. Because that eardrum is part of your immune system. It's actually protecting the inside of the ear. You might have read that the smallest thing that should go in the ear is about the size of your elbow. Got that? We should not be putting anything into our ear. How can you rinse it out? You can put your head on the side and let the water pound in there from the shower, and then wiggle your ears. Hydrogen peroxide, you can warm that and pour that in the ear. It's pretty exciting. It goes all bubbly and you get these exciting bubble noises, and that can clear it out. And also hot coconut oil, not hot enough to burn you, of course, but warm coconut oil can also loosen that. Some people definitely produce more wax than other people and have to maybe have their eye on that. Let's go to the eyes now. The eyes are an incredible creation. If something hits, can you see we've got those 2 bones there that can protect? But if it's smaller, and anything that goes anywhere near the eye naturally blinks, and that's a protection. It blinks, and also if something does get in, then you've got a lubricant there. And that lubricant, basically, if it's a bug, it drowns it. And if something's in your eye, I think we all know, you just make your eye go round the world a few times and it'll come to the corner and it can be taken out. So there's a nice protection in the eye. What about the nose? The nose is a very important part of our breathing because that's where the air should go in and should go out. And I'll look at this in more detail in the next lecture when we look at respiratory. But the nose purifies the air, it warms the air. And there are little hairs there so that if the air that you're breathing has some particles on it, it's heavy. If the air has no particles of dust on it, it's light and it goes straight down into your trachea. But if it happens to have any particles of dust, it's heavier. And when it's heavier, it ricochets all around the nostril, shoots around, causing that particle of dust to fall off it. Then the air comes light and then it goes into the trachea and down into the lungs. And even in the bronchioles there are little hairs there, so if something actually does happen to bypass that, and the only way it could bypass that is if someone's breathing through the mouth. And that should not happen. We should be breathing only through the nose. So if a person's mouth breathing and the air's not purified, then you've got tiny little hairs that are in the bronchioles that are ever pushing up, and that's where we cough it out. Now let's come to the mouth. So the mouth also has systems in there to protect. The mouth has a lot of saliva there. And when we swallow, that swallowing closes the trachea and it opens the esophagus for the food to go down there. And then there's another amazing line of defense in the stomach, which is hydrochloric acid. So in my book, Self-Heal by Design, I've got a chapter called The Stomach's Secret Weapon, Hydrochloric Acid. So hydrochloric acid does connect with pepsinogen to release pepsin, which breaks down our protein. And that process only happens in a very acid environment. That's why the stomach should always be acid. Well, it's not acid when we wake up, but when we smell food, put our breakfast together, the brain knows food's coming, then hydrochloric acid starts to be released. And hydrochloric acid plus pepsinogen, they unite to produce pepsin, and pepsin breaks down the protein. It's protein that's broken down in the stomach. But I'd like to look at hydrochloric acid's other roles. And hydrochloric acid's other roles are as antimicrobial, antibacterial, antifungal. So if we happen to eat some food that has maybe bacteria or yeast or fungus on it, the hydrochloric acid can kill that. I have a book at home. I'd heard references to this book in some articles I read. It was written in 1833. So our secretary went to Amazon and they found one copy in a state college library in the southern states of the US. It's called The Observations on the Physiology of Digestion by Dr. William Beaumont. And Dr. William Beaumont, he was a young doctor in the very early 1800s, and he was called to an accident in a trading store. A young man called Alexis St. Martin had sustained a gunshot wound to the stomach. It had gone off for some reason, and it blew part of his side out. He was only 18 at the time, and Dr. Beaumont assessed him and said he would not live. But every day when he visited him in hospital, he was recovering. And Alexis St. Martin totally recovered. But I'll tell you something very interesting. In his recovery process, twice a big tumour like a boil formed, burst, and a 2-inch piece of rib came out. So when it burst and the 2-inch piece of rib came out, what also came out? A lot of pus. What's pus? I tell you, these guys are doing a good job. There's a 2-inch piece of rib there. Just imagine if he'd taken antibiotics that settled that infection down, how the rib going to get out now? Now, I do acknowledge that in a crisis, in an extreme crisis, an antibiotic can save a life, but you've got to ask why. Why did this tumour arise and it burst, a 2-inch piece of rib came out, and that happened twice? What an amazing body we have. And after that, it healed. But once it healed, it ever had a hole in the stomach. And it had like a little, it was like a mouth, and it had like a little bit of skin over it. Dr. Beaumont said in his book he could have stitched it, but Alexis and Martin said, I don't want you to do anything else I can live with. But what Dr. Beaumont did, he started to do experiments on their stomach. And Dr. Beaumont's work is still quoted in anatomy and physiology books today. He changed the nutrition world because he proved that digestion is a chemical process. Up until that time, they thought it was mostly a mechanical process of the chewing and then the massaging, but it's a chemical process. What Dr. Beaumont did, he meticulously documented his findings. He'd get a piece of silk thread, put a bit of food on it, put it in the hole, take it out after an hour, put it back in, take it out after 2 hours, took it in and out, and he discovered that digestion takes approximately 3.5 to 4 hours. Then the stomach loves an hour break, and that's why we should be leaving 5 to 6 hours between meals. And that's what time-restricted eating talks about now. You've heard of the 5-2 diet, the intermittent fasting, eating 2 meals in a 24-hour period, 6 hours apart. But what I mostly want to talk about now, when we're talking about the immune system, is the other property of hydrochloric acid. What Dr. Beaumont did is he pulled out vials of hydrochloric acid, and he had some rotten meat, and so he squirted that into the vial, and he said within 20 minutes that hydrochloric acid had dealt with that rotten meat. And that's why dogs can eat rotten stuff, don't they? What dogs are eating are just about kill us. Do you know dogs have 10 times the hydrochloric acid that we do? That's why they get away with it. I have never met anyone with too much hydrochloric acid, but I have met many people with not enough hydrochloric acid. So if someone says to me, I've got a very acid stomach, I say, fantastic, you must be digesting your meal in a couple of hours. It's so efficient and so effective. They used to say that stomach ulcers were caused by too much acid, but they've totally changed their view. Don't you wonder, when are they going to change it again? And it's got to make sense, and it makes no sense to have low hydrochloric acid. And when someone has reflux or reburn, the acid's coming up, what are they given? Antacids. What's going to break down your protein now? Your liver makes hydrochloric acid, and it's got a yardstick. And that yardstick is how much it made yesterday. So if someone's on antacids, can you see that their liver's going to make less and less and less acid? What's going to break the protein down now? There are many people who are protein deficient, and yet they're eating sufficient protein because they have not got the enzymes in the gut to break down the protein. So if someone comes to us with reflux or heartburn and they're on protein pump inhibitors to stop that hydrochloric acid being made, we don't tell anyone what to do with their medication. We say the only people that have authority over your medication is you and your doctor. But I can tell you what I'd do, and I would stop it immediately. Because if someone's been on antacids for 10 years, I have a question, is it working? If we live in a body that has an inbuilt ability to heal itself, then why aren't we healing? And what we do is give them bitter herbs to boost their hydrochloric acid. But we give them breakfast and lunch as their main meal, so when they go to bed at night, the stomach's empty. And we give them magnesium to close that little valve at the top of the stomach. And we're giving them herbs, bitter herbs, to boost the release of hydrochloric acid, working with the body to stimulate a healing process. So if your hydrochloric acid's strong, and there happens to be some bacteria or fungus on the food you're eating, the good news is it'll wipe it out. So the only people really that get food poisoning are people with low hydrochloric acid. Because if your hydrochloric acid's strong, it should wipe it out. So let's say someone is drinking with their meals. What does that do to your hydrochloric acid? Dilutes it, waters it down. Someone's eating all day long. What does that do? Just exhaust the hydrochloric acid. Someone's stressed with their meals. Stress just blocks the production of hydrochloric acid. And so there are some certain rules that we need to abide by to ensure that digestion is well, which is eating breakfast like a king or lunch like a queen. And if you do eat at night, it should be very light, like a piece of fruit or a bowl of soup. Drinking between the meals, not with the meals. Stop drinking half an hour before the meal and resume drinking an hour and a half after the meal. And also, eating in peace. If I get a phone call in the middle of lunch, I say, excuse me, but I'm busy. This is a very important part of my day. Eating in peace and eating well. It can wait. But many people rush. You've got to take time to stop. If I go into the main kitchen and I see staff standing and eating, I say, sit. There's no eating and running. Doesn't help digestion. Let's say someone has low hydrochloric acid because of all the above, and the yeast or bacteria on the food, they survive. Well, God in his wisdom and mercy gave us another line of defence. So lining the small intestine are villi. And these villi is where the food is absorbed. So all through the villi is the blood. You see, anything that goes into our gastrointestinal tract is not part of you or me until it gets broken down and absorbed into the blood. Then it is part of you and me. The life of the flesh is in the blood. Up the middle of the villi is a lacteal, part of the lymphatic system. But covering this villi is our healthy bacteria or healthy flora. In fact, Natasha Campbell-McBride, in her book Gut and Psychology, she says we have a thick turf wall covering the villi. And when we were in our mother's womb, our gut was sterile. And when we were born, we were literally showered with our mother's microorganisms. And colostrum, that thick, yellow, creamy substance that's in a woman's breast for 3 days before her milk comes in, it's high in the mother's gut flora. That's why ideally the mother has no antibiotics in pregnancy. Because if she does, that antibiotics just greatly compromises her gut flora. What this gut flora does is it's responsible for the final breakdown of certain nutrients. It's responsible for the absorption of the nutrients out of the gut and into the blood. And these microorganisms, which is exactly why we're looking for this now, they protect. That's another line of our defence system. They protect the blood from any harmful pathogens. They stop those harmful pathogens from getting into the blood. These microorganisms also nourish the cells. And so if those pathogens, bacteria, yeast in the food, if they get past hydrochloric acid, well, then we've got another line of defence further down, which is in the lining of our small intestine. All our nutrients are absorbed halfway down our small intestine. And it's all absorbed in this area here, under the action of this gut flora. You might have heard that our gut flora plays a major role in establishing our immune system. You've heard that? Well, in the colon, and we looked at this a little bit this morning, there are Peyer's patches, and they're lymphatic vessels, and they play a major role in your immune system because they are where the lymphocytes reside. A lot of the lymphocytes reside in there. So there's this interaction between gut flora, your white blood cells, and these Peyer's patches. They're part of the lymphatic system. Unfortunately, there are many things that people are doing that are wiping out that gut flora. Antibiotics wipe out the gut flora. If someone has an infection and they take an antibiotic, the antibiotic basically says, "Get out of my way. I've got a job to do." They're like robots. And so they basically kill off some of your gut flora because they're killers. They'll kill the bad bacteria and the good bacteria. They don't decipher. Whereas herbs, in Psalm 104 verse 14, the Bible says that God gave herbs for the service of man. I love that verse. They're there to serve you. So your natural antibiotics are garlic, olive leaf extract. They don't kill the good guys. They only kill the pathogens. How so? Well, remember what God said in that verse. He gave herbs for the service of man. They work with your body. They know the good guys and they know the bad guys. It's called synergism. They work with the needs of the body. Whereas what drugs are, they're like robots. They just come in and say, get out of my way, I've got to kill the good, kill the bad. One writer said, taking an antibiotic is like dropping an atomic bomb in the gut. The good and the bad alike are both wiped out. I was reading a report of 100 people who all had the flu. 50 took antibiotics, 50 didn't, all got better. Did you hear that? All got better. One lady said, but it's 2 weeks and I'm still coughing. I said, yeah, you'll do that. You'll do that. Because if all the waste would come out of your lungs in a day, it'd kill you. The body lets it go little by little by little. We've talked about a few words. One is a one-letter word, I. I am the one that chooses. It's my God-given right. Is that right? Yeah. What a great privilege. God's government is a government of freedom, and freedom is based on free choice. I choose. I thought free choice was part of your constitution. I thought freedom of speech was part of your constitution. So how come the YouTube can take down? Sounds crazy, doesn't it? I am the one that chooses what goes into my body or what does not. And the human body will heal itself, here's the two-letter word, if you give it the right condition. And if the body's not healing, we need to put our detective hat on and find out why. And sometimes it just needs the four-letter word, time. Time. My daughter Emma, at the age of 4, she said to me one day, Mum, I'm going to grow up in a minute. No, she didn't grow up in a minute. I want to be better in a minute. But we actually don't get better in a minute. It takes time. One lady said, 25 years I've been on antibiotics on and off. Ooh, that hurt to hear that. I don't know whether they'd have any gut flora left. Ooh. I actually think that's criminal negligence. What's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results. Yeah?
Can you build the flora back up?
So what can this person do who's been on antibiotics for 25 years? Whew, they've got a long journey. And guess what it's going to take? It took 25 years to totally slaughter the gut flora. I've got some good news. It won't take 25 years to restore it. Did you hear that? But it might take several years. It might take several. And we've got some great foods that are called natural probiotics. They're cultured foods. And the culturing of foods produces the lactobacillus. So there's your sauerkraut. Also yogurt. You can get cashew yogurt, you can get almond yogurt, you can get coconut yogurt, you can get an organic soy yogurt. Kefir, miso. The Japanese use the miso, like a cultured soybean paste. Great additive when you've just finished making your lentils, to mix it in a little water, and it gives a beautiful richness to it. Throw the stock cubes out, have a look at them. Mostly of them are fairly dangerous. And remember, if you're using organic food, because of the high mineral content, it will have flavour. And cooking does not destroy minerals. Isn't that good news? Yes. So there's quite a few lines of protection. Now, if someone like this person who has been on antibiotics for so long, they may also need to supplement with a probiotic. So ideally, you get a plant-based probiotic, and it is taken 3/4 of an hour before breakfast. So it goes all the way down to here. But having the cultured foods in the diet every day, that does a lot. Now, you've probably heard of prebiotics. Prebiotics nourish and feed the probiotics. Well, there's no need to supplement with that. All you have to do is eat lots of vegetables, because that vegetable fibre feeds your probiotics. So what also compromises gut flora? What also kills off the gut flora? Statin drugs, When we look at the heart tomorrow, you will see that there is no need to take statin drugs. I'm just a journalist, really. I just gather the information and give it to you. Sorry, I had to get away from my microphone so I didn't blast your eardrums out. Statin drugs, long-term painkiller use. I've met 3 people in my travels who've had serious back injuries. Serious. Doctors did what they could, surgery's come a long way, but when there's serious damage, and then they're sent home with what? Painkillers. And then they know that after a while those painkillers are not going to do what they originally did. And also the painkillers all have side effects. So these 3 young men all had serious injuries in their 30s. I met them in their 40s. They don't know each other from different parts of the world. And they realised that they had to do something. Because what's the end result of that? It's addiction. And also it's not doing what it used to do. So they took control of their health. I am so happy when I hear people do that. And what they started to do was they started to drink more water. They started to make use of the sunshine. You know, sunshine gives you vitamin D, and your bones need vitamin D to get the minerals, because our bones are made out of minerals. Started to drink more water. They started to go to bed early, because it's in the early hours of the night, and we're going to look at that in detail tomorrow night. I'm going to show you exactly what happens in our brain and our whole body while we sleep. And you'll see the importance of sleep. And if you can't sleep, I've got some good news, and I'll talk about this on Saturday afternoon. I'm going to show you how you can rewire your brain. Trusting God. Trusting God to take your care and your stress. He is able. In fact, in Ephesians 3 verse 20, it says, "Unto him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us." Abstain. There are some things that must stop. These young men knew they had to stop those drugs, because drugs never cure disease. They started to breathe in through their noses so their air could be purified. They began to eat nutritious food. I don't think that's right, is it? I think there's some teachers in the room. Nutritious. Am I right? Don't think so. Moderation in all good things, but we're coming to the last one that made the most difference, and this was exercise. And what these young men discovered is that all the muscles in your abdomen are connected to your spine. And when you strengthen your core muscles, it holds your spine. And what one man told me recently when I was discussing this with him, I found another man. So we've got about 5 men now that I have met who are now managing their serious back injuries pain-free and medication-free. That's exciting, isn't it? And each one of them, it came through exercise, strengthening the core. When that core is strong, it connects to the spine and it holds the spine. Because your spine isn't just vertebrae, it's muscles and ligaments and tendons. And what they found is that when you start exercising and increase the blood supply to the muscles, and those core muscles get strong, then those muscles, the blood supply in them starts to nourish the bone to even cause it to regenerate. Isn't that amazing? One young man, he's actually the man, his name's Tristan, who owns Simple Needs Bakery. Serious injury. I think late 20s from a skateboarding accident down a steep hill and sliding on the gravel, etc., etc. He did a handstand for me one day, So there's his feet up in the air, and he went down from that handstand like that. Is that strong or what? That's amazing core strength. And all these men testify to me that if they do workouts every day, and maintain that core strength, they don't have pain. Isn't that incredible? And by stopping the painkillers and implementing these basic laws of health and building up their core muscles, they now have no pain. They worked with this amazing body with its inbuilt ability to heal itself. In Australia, in 2021, you could not go into the hospital unless you'd had the COVID vaccine. And this scared a lot of people. A lot of people don't want to have the vaccine because it has not been tested. And I don't know about you, but I'm not interested in being experimented on. So a lot of people are now getting interested. What can I do? What can I do to conquer my health problems? What can I do to get off my medication and live in a body that is able to sustain me? And I think that's why you're here tonight. To learn how you can boost your immune system, because we live in a body that can heal itself. But unfortunately, when those drugs are relied on, the people get addicted to it, they're slaughtering the gut flora, and when the gut flora is slaughtered, then the immune system is compromised, and then easily they come down with so many illnesses. So what is a way to boost the immune system? Sunshine. Being well hydrated. But I want to tell you another aspect of water. And this aspect of water is the most powerful way to boost your immune system. When I was in Germany a few weeks ago, in every little park there's a Kneipp water, Kneippe. Kneipp was from about the early 1900s, late 1800s, and he wrote books for nurses on water therapies. In fact, if you trained to be a nurse in the early 1900s, one of your textbooks was Kneipp's Hydrotherapy Book of Nurses. They used to do water therapy, the alternating hot and colds. And that alternating hot and colds not only brings huge amounts of blood to an area, which means more oxygen, more nutrients, more water, more waste is carried away, more white blood cells to the area. But it stimulates your bone marrow, which is where your blood is made and where your white blood cells are made, except for the lymphocytes. The lymphocytes are made in the lymph nodes and also in the Peyer's patches. So these alternating hot and cold also stimulates your bone marrow to make more blood and more white blood cells. So the alternating hot and colds is the most powerful way to boost your immune system. So the easiest way to do it is when you have a hot shower, when you've finished your hot shower, to turn the hot tap off and just have the cold water. You might scream, but don't worry about it. One lady said, "Barbara, you say we've got to listen to our body, and my body doesn't want to end the hot shower in a cold." But you know what my next comment is? Yeah, but how do you feel after you've turned that cold tap off? I've had 2 young men testify to me. They used to have coffee in the morning to give them a lift. They found something more powerful. Cold after the hot shower. Whereas with a coffee, it'll give you a quick rise, it'll give you a corresponding dump, but that cold ending will not do that. So when someone, say, has a ingrown toenail, or maybe they've got a splinter in their toe that is swollen and is all red and pussy, and we're going to look at water treatments on Friday. They can do the alternating hot and colds. And the alternating hot and colds will bring more blood to the area, more oxygen, nutrients, water, more carry the way waste, more white blood cells, brings huge relief. But it also stimulates the bone marrow to make more white blood cells. That's why water therapy is such a powerful way to boost the immune system. So this is a good time for Americans to get used to it before the winter comes, to end the hot shower. Now, I've got some good news. You can have a 10-minute hot shower and start with 10 seconds cold and move up to 20 seconds cold. And if you're really brave, go to 3 or the 30 seconds cold. You won't like it because we're warm-blooded creatures. So we resist the cold, but it has an incredible tonic effect because when the cold water hits our body, there's a reaction. And this reaction is because we're warm-blooded creatures. Because if we're lying to that cold water for a few hours, we'd possibly die of hypothermia. So there's a reaction when the cold water hits us. So that's the reaction. But how do you feel when that cold water tap's turned off and you're drying yourself? Yes. So last week when 2 weeks ago when I was in Germany for a month. And possibly because of all my travelling, I got a house clean. Call it cold, is that right? So you know what I did? I got up early, I went to bed early, I got up early, I climbed up and down the hills and I found a river. It was 6 degrees Celsius some mornings. I dived in. I was in there for 7 seconds. I built up to 10 seconds after a few days. How do I feel when I'm walking home? Alive. Because you don't get cold. It doesn't chill you. It's just a reaction. I chill very easily. But I don't chill when I do that because I'm in and out. You just get that reaction. So sorry, I don't have any expensive supplements to give you to boost your immune system. Because God's gifts are free. Isn't that true? So implementing the Sustain Me principles with a target on the exercise to strengthen that body and those muscles to compensate for injuries, but also use of water, meaning there's a time to drink and there's a time not to, and use of water, meaning using water externally to boost your immune system. It is that simple. Aren't you glad it's that simple? So it's a matter of faith. Faith in an amazing body with an inbuilt ability to heal itself. And I'd like to suggest that the other system today is a system based on fear. Trust the body and give it time. Takes time to heal. Galatians 6 verse 9, the Bible says, "Let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we will reap if we faint not." Just keep doing it. Rome wasn't built in a day. You don't get better in a day. In my next lecture, I'm going to look at respiratory, and I'm going to give you the story of how my father had asthma for 50 years before he finally conquered it. How my littlest sister, I'm one of 5 children, so the youngest one got the asthma gene. She finally conquered it at the age of 40. And then my 5th child, asthma. And by the age of 2.5, no more asthma. Isn't that good news? Because I learnt the basic conditions required for healing. And when you see a lot of systems are based on lies, whereas God's system is based on truth. And God's system requires faith in an amazing body with an inbuilt ability to heal itself, and the end is life. Whereas this system that uses fear to force people to do things and take things is often built on lies and often ends in death. But the problem is most of the lies are in such a deceptive way that it doesn't appear so. That's why when something is offered you, the best thing you can say is, thank you for your advice, I'm going to seriously consider this. Whether it be a specialist, whether it be a doctor, whether it be a naturopath, whether it be a nutritionist, because you are your own doctor. You're the one that decides what you want to do with this. And God designed our brain with the ability to use reason, intellect and judgment to assess. And that's why in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 God says, I've not given you the spirit of fear, but of power, of love and a sound mind. A sound mind assesses these things. And then it's our great privilege, it's our God-given right that we now choose what we're going to do with our body. And don't forget to give it some time. We're going to have a break now. It's 10 past and we're going to come back at 7:30 and look at the respiratory organs.